Hi, I'm Mark. I'm 34, and 2 months ago, I was foolish enough to believe that money could buy gratitude. It can't, it only buys the precise dimensions of your family's betrayal. I'm the managing partner at a successful venture capital firm. My younger brother, Leo, 32, is a self-proclaimed, spiritual entrepreneur, who mostly just sells artisanal driftwood on Etsy. My parents, Arthur and Elaine, have spent 30 years trying to elevate Leo's status and minimize mine, convinced my success is too fast and lacks soul. So, for their big 60th birthdays, I decided to give them something impossible to minimize: a private island retreat off the coast of Belize, valued at just over $2 million. It was called Cayo Escondido, Hidden Key, and it was pristine: a small, fully furnished luxury villa, private dock, and stunning coral reefs. It was my way of saying, I love you, and I've made it, and this is for you. I arranged a spectacular family dinner at their house to announce the gift. Everyone was there: aunts, uncles, cousins, even Leo, wearing a linen shirt and a perpetual expression of misunderstood genius. I stood up, cleared my throat, and handed my father a perfectly wrapped, mahogany box containing the deed and the keys to the villa. Arthur opened the box, his eyes widening as he recognized the Cayo Escondido logo on the deed. For one brief, glorious second, I saw genuine shock and happiness on his face. Then, he caught Elaine's eye. They exchanged a look, a fast, complex transaction of malice and protection, and the genuine joy vanished. Arthur cleared his throat and stood up, holding the deed high. Friends, family, he announced, his voice booming with pride. We have a wonderful announcement. For our birthdays, our son, Leo, has finally done it. He's closed his big investment deal, and he has gifted us this incredible, life-changing retreat. I froze, the smile melting off my face. Leo, sitting across the table, actually blushed and gave a humble shrug, adjusting his linen shirt. Well, Dad, he drawled. It was a complex negotiation, but I wanted to make sure you guys were set. My mother, Elaine, beamed at Leo, then shot a quick, saccharine smile at me. Mark, dear, you were so sweet to wrap the box. You always have the most beautiful wrapping paper, don't you? She had just publicly recast me as the decorative accessory, the wrapping paper for Leo's magnificent gift. I sat back down, the entire room applauding Leo, the new owner of my $2 million island. The punch of betrayal wasn't the theft of the credit. It was the realization that they had orchestrated this lie instantly, seamlessly, to protect their favored failure of a son. The applause for Leo was deafening. He was accepting air kisses and handshakes, talking vaguely about synergies and conscious investing. I felt a slow, burning heat spread through my chest, but years of corporate poker face kicked in. I kept smiling, but my eyes were drilling into my parents. Arthur, Elaine, I interjected smoothly, just as a cousin was telling Leo he was a real inspiration. That's lovely. Leo's success is certainly inspiring, but just to clarify for everyone here, Leo, you haven't actually closed any investment deals lately, have you? You were just telling me last week about the challenge of finding sustainably sourced sea glass. Arthur cut me off instantly, his voice sharp. Mark, don't be rude. Leo is simply being humble. We know he funded this, and frankly, the source of the funds is entirely his business. We just wanted to share the joy of his generosity. Elaine leaned over and patted my arm, her touch devoid of warmth. Mark, we know this is a big adjustment for you. Your firm's money is so traditional, and Leo's is much more new world. It's okay to be surprised. She was actively protecting the lie, weaponizing my actual success against me. They wanted the island, but they couldn't stand the idea that I, the son they viewed as a corporate automaton, was the one who provided it. The credit had to go to Leo, the creative genius. I looked at Leo, who had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, but he quickly recovered, meeting my gaze with a practiced, smug superiority. Mark, it's not all about quarterly reports, man. Sometimes the universe just aligns when your intentions are pure. I was seething, but I kept my voice low. Intentions, Leo? The deed is registered to Arthur and Elaine Hollis, care of Mark T. Hollis, escrow agent. The closing documents are in my briefcase. I funded this, every penny. I was the one who bought this property from the previous owner, a retired shipping magnate. I looked pointedly at Arthur and Elaine. Did the shipping magnate give Leo a shout-out? No. Because Leo was busy trying to finance a vintage artisanal pickle jar collection. The room went quiet. The family, realizing the applause had been misdirected, looked nervously between the four of us. This wasn't just a squabble. It was the public exposure of a calculated deceit. Arthur slammed his hand on the table. That's enough, Mark. You are spoiling the celebration. We have decided how this is going to be handled. You may have paid for the paperwork, but Leo has the vision for the island. He is managing the retreat. He's taking us there next week. He's managing it? I repeated, almost laughing. Leo can barely manage his laundry. He will be living there, handling the bookings, setting up the whole operation. Elaine announced, her voice firm. We're going to turn Cayo Escondido into a spiritual retreat center. Leo's going to run it, and we, the family, will be giving the island to Leo as a gift to jumpstart his true calling. It's what he deserves. They hadn't just stolen my credit. They had taken my gift, turned it into their own asset, and immediately regifted it to the son who didn't lift a finger, effectively cutting me out of the entire equation. The island was now Leo's $2 million starter kit. I looked at the keys resting on the table, realizing that while I still held the legal leverage of the original transaction, they were already moving fast to establish control. They wanted the land, but they wanted it on their terms, and their terms meant humiliating me and promoting Leo. I stood up, pushing my chair back with a loud scrape that silenced the remaining nervous chatter. The air was thick with the residue of their lie. I looked directly at my brother, Leo, who was now sweating slightly under the collar of his linen shirt. Leo, congratulations, I said, my voice dripping with corporate sincerity. You've successfully acquired a $2 million asset without spending a dime. That's actually quite impressive. Unfortunately, I have a fiduciary responsibility to that asset, seeing as my name is still all over the deed transfer documents as the principal funder, and since Arthur and Elaine are turning it into a spiritual retreat center, that constitutes a change of use that voids the insurance policy I set up. Arthur looked horrified. You wouldn't. I would, I confirmed. And since the deed also included a clause allowing me to remain the property manager of record for the first 3 months, a little detail I put in just in case of hurricanes or, family lunacy, I have full legal access to the property. And since this is now Leo's new venture, I'm going to need to do a full safety and structural assessment before he starts inviting paying customers to a potential liability nightmare. I walked over to the mahogany box, retrieved the deed and the keys, and tucked them into my jacket. Enjoy the rest of the cake, Leo. Tell the Sea Glass community you're taking a brief, 3-month sabbatical. I'm heading to Belize to manage my investment. I left the house, the taste of vindication almost as sharp as the bitterness of their betrayal. I drove straight to the airport, pulling strings and chartering a red-eye flight to Belize City. I was going to Cayo Escondido, not as a victim, but as a hostile takeover specialist. When I arrived at the pristine villa the next morning, exhausted but wired, I found it exactly as the real estate photos had promised. A slice of paradise. I spent the first 12 hours enjoying the solitude, thinking about how to weaponize this island against the people who had tried to erase me. But the real, seismic turning point came that evening, as I was reviewing the property documents, the ones I had paid for. I found a discrepancy that hadn't been flagged during the rush of the closing process. The island was sold to me by a retired shipping magnate named Silas Thorne, but the property title, deep in the legal weeds, revealed a strange caveat. Cayo Escondido wasn't just a simple property, it was technically part of a larger, historically significant chain of uninhabited islands that required continuous, specific maintenance of a centuries-old lighthouse structure. This was the detail that had dropped the price significantly, allowing me to afford it. More importantly, the deed stipulated that the island was only to be used for private residential enjoyment, and any attempt to commercialize the property, like turning it into a spiritual retreat center for profit, as Leo and my parents planned, would immediately trigger a review by the original family trust that had owned the chain, and if the trust disapproved, they had the right to seize the property for a fraction of the sale price. This wasn't just a loophole, it was a loaded gun. My parents' plan to promote Leo was about to cost them $2 million and land them in a spectacular legal trap. Their betrayal had placed them squarely in the path of a disaster they couldn't possibly see coming. I immediately decided to leverage my 3-month property management role to bait the trap and ensure they triggered the seizure clause. all while making it look like I was diligently trying to save the island for them. And my new mission was clear. I needed to accelerate my parents' plan to commercialize the island and make sure the original family trust, the Thorn Trust, run by the heirs of the shipping magnate, found out about it before the 3-month window of my property management control expired. If they triggered the seizure, my parents would lose the island, get back only a fraction of the price, which would sting, since they didn't pay for it, and crucially, Leo would be publicly humiliated. Exactly as my parents intended to humiliate me. I immediately started working on the spiritual retreat center. I used my personal funds to hire a small construction crew from Belize City, instructing them to install bright, garish signage announcing the Cayo Escondido Soul Alignment Center. I ordered dozens of custom-made, wildly expensive, but aesthetically appalling Zen garden accessories and had them scattered around the otherwise tasteful property. I even created a fake, terrible website for the retreat, featuring pictures of Leo's driftwood art and a calendar packed with advanced aura cleansing workshops. I was pouring salt into the wound I had sustained, making my parents' stupid lie look even more ridiculous. I was playing the role of the dutiful, if tasteless, son, helping Leo with his vision. Of course, my parents and Leo were thrilled. I got an excited, if condescending, call from Elaine. "Mark, we've seen the pictures of the signage. It's very bold. We knew you'd understand the importance of making Leo's venture shine." She didn't thank me, she congratulated herself on my obedience. Leo was even more insufferable. "Mark, man, you're actually stepping up. But about those Buddha statues? Maybe less plastic, more natural stone. We're going for authenticity." He was completely oblivious to the legal time bomb ticking beneath the new coat of synthetic gold paint. My next step was to ensure the Thorn Trust found the evidence. I discovered the trust was managed by Silas Thorn's great-nephew, a notoriously conservative, publicity-shy lawyer named Julian. Julian's stated purpose was to uphold Silas's legacy of maintaining the island chain's unspoiled natural state. I sent Julian a series of anonymous, frantic emails, signing them as a concerned local environmentalist. The emails detailed the impending, commercial desecration of Cayo Escondido, complete with links to the fake website and the garish pictures of the new signage. I emphasized the planned high-volume tourist traffic and the potential damage to the coral reefs. I knew Julian wouldn't ignore a threat to his family's environmental legacy. I waited. The waiting was the hardest part, filled with the delicious, terrible anticipation of corporate doom. 3 days later, I got a registered letter, delivered via express courier to the island. It was from the Thorn Trust, addressed to the current legal owner of Cayo Escondido, which, despite my name on the closing documents, was legally my parents', Arthur and Elaine. The letter stated, in cold, legalistic language, that the trust had strong evidence of the current owners violating the property's residential-only covenant by attempting to establish a commercial entity. As per the deed's stipulations, the trust was exercising its right of first refusal and seizing the property immediately, effective at the end of the month, refunding the owners only the original sale price minus all legal fees and accrued maintenance costs. They had done it. They were safe from hurricanes, but not from their own vanity. I had successfully orchestrated the loss of the $2 million island, making it look like I was merely fulfilling my management duties and protecting them from the financial risks of Leo's vision. The moment the official seizure notice arrived, I knew I had to play the final act of the innocent, diligent son. My goal was to make my parents believe I had fought tooth and nail to save the island from the ruthless Thorn Trust, and that Leo's reckless ambition was the sole cause of the loss. I called Arthur and Elaine, sounding completely distraught. "Mom, Dad, it's a disaster. The Thorn Trust just hit us with a massive legal notice. They're seizing the island. They say Leo's spiritual retreat plans violated the original owner's conservation agreement." Arthur was apoplectic. "Seizing it? They can't do that. We're the owners." "They can, Dad," I explained, referencing the clause I had found. "The second Leo started advertising soul alignment workshops and put up those enormous signs, the trust had the legal right to seize the property for violating the private residential use only covenant. They sent me copies of the emails and the retreat website. The evidence is airtight. They've already filed the motion." Elaine was already shifting the blame. "But Mark, you were supposed to be the property manager. You were supposed to protect us. Why didn't you check the fine print? I did check the fine print, Mom. I shot back, injecting just enough defensiveness to sound wounded, not guilty. I warned you about the fragile nature of the deed, but Leo's vision was already in motion. I was frantically trying to get the new signs down and cancel the retreat bookings, but I was too late. Leo's enthusiasm sealed our fate. I heard Leo's voice in the background, muffled but indignant. My enthusiasm? Mark, you were the one who put up the giant Welcome to Soul Alignment banner. You ordered all that hideous garden decor. I was following your directives, Leo, I said, my voice rising in manufactured frustration. You sent me the designs. I was trying to support your venture, the one you gifted to Mom and Dad. I just tried to make sure your signage met local regulatory standards, which apparently was the final straw for the trust. I hung up, leaving them with the perfect narrative. Leo's artistic recklessness, combined with my failed attempt to support his vision, had cost them the island. I had successfully turned the island into a white elephant that they couldn't afford to keep and were now about to lose spectacularly. The final element of my plan was to ensure the financial sting was immediate and painful. When the Thorn Trust seized the property, they were required to refund the original purchase price to the owners, my parents, minus a hefty penalty for the violation and all accrued legal fees. I waited until the closing papers for the refund were sent to my parents, and then I stepped in. I contacted the Thorn Trust's legal team, asserting my original role as the property's escrow agent and funder. I provided them with documentation showing that the $2 million came directly from my personal and company accounts, and that the gift was immediately followed by Leo's illegal commercialization attempt. I argued that as the true funder, I was entitled to retrieve the refund directly, as they were the ones who had incurred the initial financial loss. The Thorn Trust, focused entirely on the commercial violation and keen to wash their hands of the mess, quickly agreed to wire the refund minus the massive penalties directly to an escrow account under my control. My parents, fighting among themselves and dealing with the shame of the seizure, never saw it coming. They received a single, final document stating that the property had been seized and the funds had been returned to the original source. The $2 million was gone, replaced only by a massive legal penalty and a worthless refund notice they couldn't cash. The fallout was exactly as catastrophic as I'd hoped. My parents were left with nothing. Not only had they lost the island, but they were now fielding calls from every relative who had been led to believe Leo was a successful investor. They didn't just lose $2 million. They lost face, prestige, and their beloved narrative of Leo the Golden Boy. They were suddenly forced to explain why Leo's magnificent gift had been seized after 3 weeks of ownership, and why they had only received a letter confirming the return of funds to the original escrow. My favorite detail was the refund amount. After the Thorn Trust deducted the penalty for violating the residential covenant, the legal fees for the seizure, and the cost of removing the absurd Soul Alignment Center decor, the actual amount wired back to my escrow account was $1.6 million. I had lost $400,000 to teach them a lesson, a bargain. Honestly, I flew back home 3 weeks later, looking suitably stressed and apologetic. I arrived at their house for a reconciliation dinner that was anything but. Arthur and Elaine were grim-faced. Leo was already sulking on the couch, blaming the entire disaster on Mark's clumsy execution of the initial logistics. You lost the island, Mark, Arthur stated without preamble. You were supposed to be the sensible one. Your corporate efficiency failed us. I know, Dad, I said, putting on my best shamed son performance. It was Leo's dream, and I tried to support it, but that legal covenant was a ticking time bomb. I wish I could fix it, but the Thorn Trust is ruthless. They took the island and the money is gone. They sent a refund notice, but it's clear they took every penny for legal fees and damages. We got burned. I looked over at Leo, who was now furious. It's all on your stupid, fake retreat, Leo. Your commercialization idea ruined it. I shot back, deflecting perfectly. Elaine sighed, exhausted. Well, at least we learned a valuable lesson, Leo, dear. Maybe stick to the driftwood for now. She turned to me, a sudden, calculating glint in her eyes. Mark, you're back home now. You need to focus on your work. Since you're so financially secure, perhaps you could help us recover the losses? We need capital for a new venture. And there it was, the pivot, the belief that even after the colossal failure, My sole function was to replenish their coffers. They were already moving on to the next grift. I realized they hadn't learned a thing. They still believed they were entitled to my money, and that I was the expendable source. That I smiled, a slow, genuine smile that didn't reach my eyes. Recover the losses? Mom, Dad, I have some good news and some bad news. I paused for dramatic effect. The bad news is, I can't help you with your recovery. The good news? The money isn't gone, it never left. It was transferred from the Thorn Trust directly back into my account, and it's not going anywhere near your new venture. I bought the island, I controlled the deed, and when the original funder was entitled to the penalty refund, that funder was me. I pulled up my phone and displayed the current, substantial balance of the escrow account. You didn't lose the money, Mom and Dad, you lost the right to spend it. The sight of the money still in my account shattered their composure. Arthur and Elaine stared, disbelief turning to raw, panicked fury. I hadn't just lost the island. I had engineered its seizure, ensured they took the public blame, and recovered the cash, leaving them only with the shame and legal bills. You let us go through all that humiliation just to prove a point? Elaine hissed. I let you face the consequences of your greed. I corrected. You wanted the island, but demanded Leo get the credit. That vanity forced you to violate the covenant, and I merely enforced the contract. Arthur, defeated, conceded that I had calculated their failure perfectly. Good property management, Dad. I pulled up another document. I've already used some recovered funds to purchase a remote, landlocked, uninhabitable parcel in northern Maine. It's perfect for a struggling artist. I looked at Leo. It's your new gift, tax-free. I knew he couldn't refuse the title, but the land was a barren, useless monument to his vision. The remaining $1.6 million, I announced, standing up, is going into a private conservation foundation in Belize, named after the man whose trust seized your island, a fund you will never benefit from. I had successfully turned their betrayal into my final, devastating victory.